Hello there and welcome to another tier series race. This week we're in the Dominator and the track that we're driving on this week is basically like the Monaco of GTA Online racing. It's very tight, very twisty, and most of the lap is you are pretty much constantly surrounded by walls very close to the track, so very difficult to drive on, and it's also a very difficult car, so this was quite a challenging week. What's also notable about this week is that it's actually the first weekend in which I've caught up to the lowest tier in the race. So we've got two other people that are in the Dominator, which is the lowest tier that anyone's managed to reach yet, Taxonomon and Street Dog, and they both reached the Dominator a few races ago actually, and I've finally caught up because I missed 3 or 4 rounds earlier on in the championship. So I've kind of always been playing catch up in that regard, but we finally managed to actually get down to that final tier. But one of the things that has sort of been a bit of a recurring theme so far is that when both Taxonomon and Street Dog have gotten down to the Dominator, you know, it has taken them a number of races and they're still trying to get out of this tier, so it's not looking likely that we'll get promotion this week. The Dominator does seem to suffer quite a lot in terms of its promotion potential. Regardless of whether it's likely or not that we will get promotion, we're still going to give it our best shot, and what you're currently watching at the minute is my qualifying lap for this round. This ended up being a pretty good qualifying lap actually. Going into this round I wasn't entirely sure about my pace. I thought my pace was okay. My personal best around here was a 55.1 or 55.2 I think, whereas Street Dog had a 54 personal best, but we get pretty close to our PB on this qualifying lap, so I was quite happy with that, and yeah, we end up qualifying in a decent position. Okay, so here we are on the starting grid waiting for the lights to go out for the start of the race, and with this race I'm just going to do a little bit of a different format to what I would normally do. So normally I would cut down the race into the highlights and then kind of talk over those highlights, but what I'm instead going to try and do in this race is just a slightly different format where I'm actually going to leave the full race in, but then just kind of do bits of voiceover for the bits where I kind of feel as though need explaining or talking about, and there's a few reasons for that. The first reason being it's been Christmas and I've been away from home over Christmas and I've just not really had as much time to edit the video down as I would have liked. So that's kind of reason number one. But then the second reason is that actually when with this particular race there was, you know, I mentioned during qualifying that this is kind of the Monaco of GTA Online racing, and as a result of that it kind of meant that there was quite a lot going on, and I kind of felt as though it would be difficult to do the race justice by cutting it down to just highlights. So there's a couple of reasons why I'm doing it this way. Hopefully it ends up making a decent video. But yeah, without too much further ado, let's get on with the race. So unfortunately right off the bat we have been sent pretty much to the back of the grid, due to a fairly unfortunate situation there. Just got rear-ended into the hairpin. Obviously there's no hard feelings with, you know, anyone else that was involved in that. It's just, you know, FiveM lag, it's inevitable, it's gonna happen. So yeah, like I said, there's no hard feelings. It's just one of them things. I understand it's going to happen, but it is unfortunate and it is annoying. But yeah, so it was already going to be a tough race. We were starting in, well, Street Dog was in 18th and I was in 19th position off the start. There were, I think that says there's 28 people in the race. So, you know, in order to get promotion, we were going to have to be in the top 14. So it was already looking like it was going to be unlikely that we would get promotion just based off where we qualified. But who knows? You know, the race could have been a different story. But yeah, now that we're back in, well, we were further back, but we've had a few people respawn in front of us. We're now down in 23rd position. So yeah, this has basically transformed the race from one where we were probably aiming to try and go for promotion if it was at all possible, to one where we are now kind of in a battle for the next best thing, which in my opinion is to try and sort of win your tier. So like I mentioned earlier during qualifying, there's two other drivers in my tier. We've got Taxon and we've got Street Dog. So at this point, all I'm thinking now is, okay, promotion isn't really going to be on the cards anymore. Just forget about that. There's no point even thinking about it. Let's just see if I can beat Taxon and Street Dog. And yeah, let's just see how that plays out. So we've just lost a position to that cheetah there. There was some contact involved, which I was a bit annoyed about at the time, but I kind of, in the moment, I sort of thought, you know what, there's probably not much point in like typing in the chat and calling them out. They're obviously in a much faster car. Let's just see if they can kind of, you know, gain a few positions ahead and maybe cause some other people some issues. There's not much, there's not much point calling them out, only for them to like have to then re-overtake me and cause me more issues and cost me more time. So yeah, as far as I was concerned, I was quite happy just to have them ahead of me, and yeah, that meant that I had less to focus on and yeah, less potential issues for me. That was quite a hairy moment there, but thankfully we were both okay and were able to carry on with our races as normal. So we're coming in for our first pit stop now, and I did actually consider coming in early on that previous lap, because obviously you could see I was, I was quite close to another car. I was quite close to Bojanster, who was in the Bullet. And yeah, obviously you kind of, in general, always want to have clean air in front of you. You'd much rather run by yourself than be caught up in a battle with someone, because it just costs you a lot more time. But one of the things that one of the rules that I kind of, tend to think about in these races is that if you stop early in your first pit stop and the race ends up being close on fuel at the end, you're basically reducing your options. So yeah, I always try and avoid making an early pit stop on the first pit stop, because yeah, you're basically reducing your options and give yourself less wiggle room later on in the race. So I elected to go as far as I could, which was to come in on this lap. And yeah, that might end up actually being quite important when it comes to the end of the race. So I was just letting the leader through there, because in this series we run with blue flag rules, which means that if you're getting lapped, then that means you should, whenever there's a good opportunity to do so, you should let the leaders through, so that you don't impede them in their race. And you'll notice that during this race, that's probably one of the sort of recurring themes, really, is that trying to find a good place to let someone through, especially if you've got like a good driver and a good car, the closing speeds can be pretty rapid when you're sort of talking about cheaters and jesters and adders, against a dominator. The closing speeds, especially on a track like this, can, they were really quite significant. So yeah, it was really quite challenging actually to kind of always find like a good place to let someone through. And yeah, I think for the most part I did a decent job at it in this race, but I'll obviously, it'll be obvious when it happens later on in the race, but there is right at the end of the race a moment where I kind of messed it up a little bit, and I thankfully it was only me that saw the negative consequences of that. Thankfully I didn't take someone out or anything like that. But yeah, it's just one of those additional things to think about. And, there's already a lot to think about in this race. Driving quite a challenging car. It's obviously a challenging circuit. Trying to think about fuel. Then you add on top of that trying to sort of think about the blue flags and letting them through at the optimal times. This was quite a mentally draining race actually. There was an awful lot to think about. And as I've already said, I did make a bit of a mistake when it came to the blue flags, but again, we'll see that later on in the race and I'll talk about it then. But yeah, that is those blue flags. Yeah, that's probably going to be a bit of a recurring theme through this race, is just trying to find the best time to let them through. Okay, so a few things just happened there. The first was Street Dog made a bit of a mistake, which I've actually gone back and watched his footage of kind of what happened there, because I remember being a bit confused about how that even happened when I was behind him, and yeah, I think he just kind of got quite unlucky, to be honest. On the exit of that corner there are a couple of bollards, and yeah, I think he just clipped one of those bollards and it just kind of messed with the hitbox in a bit of a weird way and sent him flying. So yeah, I think that was quite unlucky, really. It's one of those things where it was such a small mistake, but it had such massive consequences. But you know, I'll take it. It obviously gives me the position, and yeah, obviously, you know, you'd prefer not to be, for your direct competitors to get unlucky. It would be nice to sort of gain the position through, I guess, fairer means. But again, like I said, I'm not going to complain too much about it. I'll take it. It's happened. It's whatever. Luck goes both ways. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you get unlucky. And yeah, Street Dog, I think, got a bit unlucky there. But then the second thing that happened was, to be honest, I've actually watched it back a couple of times and I'm still not entirely certain what happened. I'm pretty sure that guy in the cheetah, Tom, I think he must have respawned. And yeah, it caught me out massively. I really wasn't expecting to see, a car stopped and completely on the racing line, through basically the tightest section on the track. So you can kind of, if you watch it back, you can see that I initially start to brake because I'm like, obviously trying not to hit him. But then I kind of realised I probably can't actually stop in time, and that maybe he'll just move off the racing line, which is kind of, if you're going that slowly at that point on the track, especially with cars behind you, at least in my mind, I'd be thinking I'm going to try and get off the racing line here. But evidently that doesn't happen. I end up going into the side of him. I think I send him flying off the circuit, but to be honest, I wasn't too concerned about that. As far as I was concerned, he probably, shouldn't have been there, shouldn't have been going so slowly there. If he was going to go so slowly there, should have probably moved to the side of the track, because, yeah, there wasn't an awful lot that I could have done in the time that I had to react to the situation. So, yeah, we gained a position on Street Dog, we then gained a position on the cheetah, and as you can see at the minute, we're in a bit of a busy situation where we've been letting through a few of the leaders through as well. Okay, so the second thing that happened was, to be honest, I was actually watched it back a couple of times and I'm still not entirely certain what happened. I'm pretty sure that guy in the cheetah, Tom, I think he must have respawned. And yeah, I really wasn't expecting to see, a car stopped and completely on the racing line, through basically the tightest section on the track. So yeah, So we're coming in for our second pit stop of the race, and as you can see, we're joined in front of us by Taxon, who also came in on this lap. I had calculated that I was using somewhere in the region of 8 litres a lap, but it was really difficult to calculate on this circuit, as you can imagine. Obviously, you're concentrating so hard on just driving the circuit that trying to keep an eye on the fuel and do the mental maths at the same time was quite challenging. I'd actually calculated earlier on in the race that I was using closer to 7 litres a lap, but I recalculated a few times because I was pretty certain that wasn't correct, because I think I'd been having to slow down on those laps because I was quite close to other people. I was in the middle of battles, so I'm quite thankful that I did recalculate, because I came past the pits there with 6 point something litres. If I had still been under the assumption that I was using 7 litres a lap, I might have risked it for another lap. But yeah, because I'd recalculated and worked out I was actually using 8 litres a lap, I decided that was too much of a risk. I'm going to come in, and yeah, I'm very glad that I did, actually, because you will have noticed that me and Taxon came in, but Street Dog did not. And I think he very quickly realised that was a mistake, because he sort of pulled over to the side of the road to try and enter the pits kind of further down the road, but realised he couldn't, so then continued on, and then ended up sort of just about running out of fuel at the end of kind of this current lap, the one where he was going to come in. So so basically the impact on the race is that kind of means that, unfortunately for him, Street Dog is kind of out of contention for trying to, quote unquote, win the Dominator race. But now we've kind of got a new battle where we're racing Taxon, and obviously we're very close together. We're both on the same fuel strategy, so we'll see how this plays out. Despite a few stunt jumps, we were actually able there to capitalise on Taxon's mistake. Again, it's, you know, one of those things where it was, in the grand scheme of things, a fairly small mistake that Taxon made. Again, same with Street Dog's point of view. I've gone back and watched Taxon's footage just because I was curious to see kind of how that ended up happening. And yeah, it was one of those small things where, you know, you kind of misjudged. I think he misjudged the right-hander, which put him on a bad line through kind of the exit where it curves to the left, and that kind of, yeah, bounced him kind of across the track over to the right-hand side. And I think there's a bush there, which again didn't help the situation, kind of meant that he was, you know, even more so than before, kind of on track to kind of hit that wall. So yeah, one of those things where it's just a very small mistake, but it has, you know, quite severe consequences. So yeah, so far, you know, we've, you know, I don't want to say we've had a good race because obviously lap 1 happened, but as far as my own driving has gone so far, I haven't actually made any major mistakes. There's been a few little slides, wall hits that would be heavier than you'd really want, sort of here and there, but in the grand scheme of things, I've not made any major mistakes that have cost me multiple seconds or positions. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm quite happy with how this race is going, and at the moment I am currently, you know, quote unquote leading the Dominator race, which is, yeah, it's where I want to be. So in terms of how the rest of the race is going to go, if you look at the fuel and the number of laps left, I'm definitely going to need to make one more pit stop. It's just a case of when I'm going to make that pit stop, and yeah, I just need to try and keep it as clean and tidy as I can now. Make the pit stop when I need to, don't make any mistakes, like I did just there. Try and avoid doing that too often, and yeah, just keep it clean till the end of the race. So coming in for our third and final pit stop, because I've noticed that my fuel is a fair bit below kind of what I think I'm using on a lap. Again, at this point, I'm still, same as before, thinking I'm using around 8 litres a lap, maybe 8 to 8.5 litres a lap. Just to be safe, I calculated the number of laps I had remaining and then multiplied that by 8.5 just to be kind of sure that I was going to have enough fuel. And I think when I did that, because I needed to do the number of laps remaining plus the half lap to get back to the start finish line, and then multiply that by 8.5 litres a lap. I think I'm remembering this correctly. I think I'd worked out that I was going to need 55.5 litres, so I was going to be 1.5 litres short if it was 8.5 litres per lap that I was using. And so, yeah, what you'll notice after this pit stop is I begin to fuel save a little bit. Again, I'm kind of aware that I'm probably being a little bit conservative with the fuel. I estimated that I was using somewhere between 8 and 8.5 litres per lap, but just to be on the conservative side, I worked out kind of my fuel remaining to the end of the race based on 8.5 litres. By using that conservative figure, I estimated that I was going to need a fuel save. And so, yeah, you'll notice during this final stint that I have never actually tried to fuel save on this server before. So I was kind of, a bit of a foray into the unknown. But the way that I was kind of doing it was that when I was on high speed sections and I'd already kind of accelerated up close to top speed, I would just lift off a bit and go half throttle. Maybe I would short shift in places where I previously wouldn't short shift, that kind of thing. So yeah, that was kind of like my attempt at fuel saving. So yeah, I mentioned earlier on in the race that there was, going to be a point later on in the race where I would make a mistake with the blue flags, and yeah, that was the moment where I sort of, in my view, I think I made a bit of a mistake. I had let someone else through on that corner earlier on in the race, so I kind of thought, it's probably going to be fine. It worked last time, so it'll work this time. But obviously, on this occasion, I think combination of lag plus the sort of overspeed that the other driver had meant that, it didn't end up going as cleanly as it did the previous time. So that mistake from my side, I should have just waited until maybe the final corner, where he could either drive around the outside or I could go around the outside and let him down the inside. That would have been a much better place. But yeah, that was my fault. But that does mean that, previously I had quite a healthy lead over Taxon. It was kind of fluctuating between 5-6 seconds, sort of depending on traffic. But now he's kind of much closer than he was before. He's within a couple of seconds. So, I previously thought I was going to have like a nice, easy end to the race. It's actually a little bit more stressful than I kind of was originally hoping it would be. So there we have it, that's the end of the race. Obviously finished in 22nd position, as you can see, which was much lower than I would have really been hoping for, but given what happened at the start of the race, I think we kind of actually maximised kind of what I could get out of it. So from that side of things, I'm quite happy. As you can see at the bottom with the fuel, I ended up finishing with easily enough fuel, so I probably didn't need to fuel save. I was being overly conservative. And yeah, in terms of the editing of the video, I hope that this was, still an entertaining watch, and yeah, I think I might consider doing this again in the future, so feedback on that would be welcome. But yeah, thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.